Councilmember, do you want us to all say our names or?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think I apologize. I was in a mindset of a traditional council committee meeting of having our clerks call us to order. I apologize because I just hopped over from a different committee meeting. And no, I will actually just begin with our welcome. Thank you, Jesse. Um, So first off, thank you all for attending this second meeting with Vision Zero Task Force. And for those of you tuning in the first time, I am your council member for the District 3 area, Raul Perales, and the chair, one of the co-chairs of this task force, and joined by my fellow co-chair, or the vice chair, Councilmember Pam Foley. And I do want to start off this meeting on what will be more of a somber note. And while this year has been a challenging year with the pandemic, we sadly have had over 40 traffic fatalities. And as we meet and discuss things like stats and data, we want to remember that these are lives lost, mothers, fathers, grandparents, and children's lives who were cut short. I, along with Vice Chair Foley, would like to begin this meeting by reading off the names of all of those who have perished this year on our streets. And I will read all the names from the beginning of the year up into our first Vision Zero meeting. Jose Sepulveda, Duncan Stout, Jesse Espinosa Garcia, Jose Caetano, Maria de Jesus Lopez Curiel, unnamed motorist, unnamed male motorist, unnamed male motorist, unnamed female pedestrian, Maurice Dillard, Quan Vo, Gerald Boyer, Casey Josephine Wafler Espinosa, Frank Coe, Cesar Heredia, unnamed male pedestrian, Calvin Green, unnamed male bicyclist, Julio Perez, unnamed male pedestrian, Cynthia Carmen Bernard, unnamed male bicyclist, Nicholas Hall, Rodrigo Llamas, unnamed female motorist, Romulo Soriano Jr., Alexander Leaston, unnamed female pedestrian, unnamed male pedestrian, unnamed male motorist, unnamed male bicyclist, Donald Fisher, unnamed motorist, and Christopher Sosa.
And I will read the names from the end of September through December 6th. Juan Sandoval Perez, Matthew Norreed, Galindo Limon Agredano, Maria Lourdes Garcia Jauregui, unnamed male pedestrian, unnamed male pedestrian, unnamed female pedestrian, Chandrashwar Singh, unnamed female motorist, Amaris Medina.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Foley. And we will make a point of it to kick off each of our task force meetings, listing off the names of those that have perished since our last meeting. And it is certainly our hope to bring these names to light, but also as a recognition, and our hope is to not list any names in the future. So on September 25th, we kicked off the first task force meeting to bring together stakeholders at the county, city, and community level to help guide the Vision Zero strategies to make our streets safer. And in particular, the task force is intended to do the following: provide quarterly traffic fatality and severe injury reports, review quarterly traffic enforcement given to top 5 KSI causes, bring together decision makers from city and county departments to leverage resources for a shared goal of reducing traffic fatalities, and guide implementation of the Vision Zero Action Plan. Now, the theme of our meeting today is outreach. And the theme of this is one that's focused on action plan items aimed to help achieve Vision Zero. The outreach is broad in sense and includes community engagement, education, branding, and safety messaging, in addition to creating a thoughtful communication strategy that takes into account all available contextual data. Regional collaboration is essential in ensuring we leverage agency resources to maximize community reach, and that the effort is focused, meaningful, and inclusive. Many of you and your agencies already work in this space, and I look forward to having a dialogue today on how we can best collaborate. To that end, 2 staff-level working groups have been created for staff of the city and county departments that are part of the Vision Zero Task Force to collaborate together. The Outreach Working Group chose 2 agency departments, the County Office of Education and VTA, as well as 2 advocates, the California Walks and Walk San Jose, or excuse me, California Walks, Walk San Jose, and AARP, to share their outreach work today. The County Office of Education and VTA cover our county broadly and have staffs who focus on creative impact and marketing. California Walks and AARP work with key Vision Zero constituencies. The largest group of traffic fatalities in San Jose by road user type are people hit while walking. 113 of over 250 people killed in traffic in the last 5 years. Their median age was 52 years old. There have also been a clear, there's also been a clear uptrend in the age of people hit while cycling. Their median age was 58. When they present later in today's meeting, I encourage you to think about collaboration opportunities. There will be a task force member discussion after their presentations, followed by open forum for the public to comment at the end of the meeting. All right, and then I believe we now have our minutes to be posted. So the way we will host our or post our meeting minutes from the September 25th meeting will be on the Vision Zero website, and you may reach out to staff directly with any comments or updates you may have. We will not be taking motions or votes on the minutes, but they will be posted after each meeting. Okay, just a bit of housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded and it will be posted. Panelists have been muted by default. Since we do have a large group, please click on the raised hand function in your toolbar in order to be called on, and then mute and unmute accordingly. Attendees will have an opportunity to publicly comment on open forum. This is due to the large number of panelists and limited time. And speaking of limited time, we will do our very best to stay with the prescribed times on the agenda. Open forum will be at the end of the meeting. If you intend to speak during today's open forum, please raise your hand or press *9 on your phone so we can gauge how much time we may need. Thank you. Right now we'll move to the follow-up items, which are BTA injuries and fatalities, data sharing with the city of San Jose. And I believe we have Angelique Guetta.
Thank you, Council Member. So as you mentioned, although this meeting was to focus on outreach, we've been working on collecting data and actually had staff out revisiting the sites that seem to have a higher number of incidents to evaluate whether there are conditions that contribute to the incidents occurring. Just for a little bit of background, anytime an incident occurs, particularly a serious injury or fatality, we have a team that does accident investigation, and it is a very in-depth investigation, and the reports are submitted to the regulatory agencies as appropriate. At that time, we do look at not just the actions of the operator and the individual impacted, but we also look at the weather conditions, street conditions, signage, and so those are very in-depth reports, And we are working through those reports to see if anything is highlighted as something that can be addressed by the jurisdiction where the incident occurred, because as you know, we run throughout the county. Typically, if there is something that we identify, we reach out to the appropriate jurisdiction, and we ask to work with them on correcting that condition. Sometimes it can be something as simple as a tree branch that's hanging too low that needs to be trimmed back, that's causing our buses, for example, to continue to make contact with it, or to have to swerve out of the way, and then another incident occurs because of that. So that's just an example of how we go through our accident investigation. With that said, on the bus side, we have yet to find anything with the locations that we have identified as having increased incidents in terms of steps that we can take with the city to enhance safety, if you will, or to address any condition that may be interfering with our operations. That said, later on in I think the city's presentation, there are intersections and corridors where we operate that we understand the city will be doing some sign enhancement or other enhancements to the road. And we'd like to work with the city to review and provide recommendations as they relate to transit operations. I have identified an individual from my team that can work directly with city staff. That's Antonio Tovar. He's one of our safety officers, and he is well experienced and well versed in transit operations and safety enhancements. On the light rail side of things, it's a bit different. Although all crossings that are at grade, which means that they're on the same level with the street, and we'll have vehicles and pedestrians coming into contact with our crossings in terms of crossing over the tracks. For the most part, well, not for the most part, excuse me, all of our crossings are currently safety compliant and comply with all regulations, both federal and state. There are some crossings within the area of the quiet zone in the city of San Jose that have seen an increase in incidents. And when I say quiet zone, I mean that we are not allowed to sound our horns. We have been trying to work with the city on this particular issue because of the increase in both residential and commercial development. Has brought more individuals into these areas and has, in our analysis, increased the opportunity for more incidents to occur. So we are not allowed to sound our horns in the quiet zone at all. What we're asking from the city and the FRA to support is a partial quiet zone so that we can respect the quiet time from adjacent residents and only sound our horns during the day hours when activity is higher and not sound them in the evening hours. This is consistent with when we see the most of our incidents occurring because there is more activity during the day. So we'd like to continue to have those conversations with the city and see if we can't come to an agreement in implementing a partial quiet zone. And we do think that that will impact the number of incidents that happen around the rail in that area. One last note we would like to see added to the discussion are the delivery bots that we're seeing operating in the downtown area. We've had a couple of incidents or near misses with our trains, and we understand that the city is in conversation with the manufacturer or operator of those bots. We'd like to be at the table in those conversations to ensure that there's not just interference with the trains, but interference with our trains could lead to subsequent injury to individuals. We want to make sure that that doesn't occur. So we're continuing to work with city staff. We'd asked for a point person on the bots issue, and we're continuing to have conversations with city staff on the quiet zone, and we'd asked for cooperation on a partial quiet zone. And then we have a point person for the bus incidents in the areas identified by the city staff. That's the end of my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Angelique. And just to clarify one thing, you had made a mention that you're not able to sound the horn at all. You are able to, the conductors are able to sound it if they see an intrusion, correct?
That is correct. Typically, our operations allow us to sound a warning horn 20 seconds in advance of the intersection at intervals. And that actually would help in the quiet zone because we do have a number of individuals that ignore our warning signals. So they go underneath or around the arms, both walking, on bike, and even in automobiles. So even though the arms are down, they ignore them because they don't hear the train coming. And that's posed a challenge for us. So yes, if we see someone coming across the train, we can sound our horns then, but sometimes that's too late.
Great, thank you, and thank you for providing the update. And thank you for those that are already raising their hands. It will help us as we can gauge to see how many public speakers we will have at the towards the end of the meeting. So let's see here. Now we'll go on to our reports and updates section. And for item 2, reports and updates, Jesse Mintz-Roth will give us some updates on the Vision Zero key metrics. Updates on the Vision Zero action plan, priority action areas will follow, and presented by Jesse Mintz-Roth and Vu Dao from Department of Transportation and Lieutenant Anaya from SJPD. And task force members, please feel free to ask questions during the presentation after each item. And again, just use your raise hand function and I will monitor.
Okay, thank you, Council Member Perales. I am going to go through this part of the presentation. So you can see here that we are, this year is an unusual year. And so we wanted to show a little bit of what that looks like compared to last year and also to the previous data years. Basically, other US cities here as well have reported that traffic volume is down. And so crashes and injuries are down, but speeding is still up due to lower congestion. And so that means that our fatal and severe injuries and fatalities are still in the range of previous years. So I will take us through a few data slides. So this looks at 2020 compared to the previous 5 years for crashes. And so you can see that up until March, the data is in range of previous years. And then as we move on from March, the number of crashes goes below the range, bringing us to where we are now, which is, as I mentioned in the last slide, 20 to 30% below normal. And this is the same idea, but for injuries, which you can see again, March is in the normal range. And then as we get on from March, it drops below. But then the point I made about there's less congestion, there's still a lot of severe injuries occurring. There's a lot of speeding, and so we are still seeing the KSI rate to be in range of the last 5 years, despite the lower traffic. And this is consistent with other cities in the US. And then if we look to fatalities, this is very month to month, and we're also highlighted some quarters here to make it easier to see that as well. So you can see that the slope of the line changes month to month, and at the moment there are 44 fatalities in 2020. If you look at it month to month, though, the way that it lands in August is low, and the way that it lands in September is high. At the moment, the way it landed in November is low. So if we were to look at this on a, compared to previous years, it's looking as if this year will end low, although as you can see, there's some months where there's a very high uptick. And typically in this time of year, we do tend to see an uptick due to basically due to rush hour occurring when it's darker out, basically daylight savings time, and also sometimes the holidays. So it's too early to say how the year will end compared to previous years. but you can see the sort of month-to-month changes in the data in this slide. So this is to look at the trend of the last 10 years. Obviously, we've presented this slide many times showing that our fatality numbers have gone up a lot, doubled from 2010 to 2019. So this just gives more context of the last slide. And if we look at traffic fatalities by street user type, also, we've used this slide a lot in the past too, but we wanted to show the way that 2020 has progressed compared to the last 5 years. So far in 2020, we're seeing the same type of splits by percentage that we have seen in recent years, where people hit while walking are still the largest group, 43% at the moment compared to 42% last year. Motor vehicle occupant, 41% this year compared to 37% last year. So these are the new traffic fatalities that have occurred since we last met. We last met on the 25th for the task force, and at that point we were reporting traffic fatalities up to the 21st. And so this shows traffic fatalities. Actually, the data at the top right isn't exactly right. We're showing them up until the 7th of December. And so 44 is the total number of fatalities, but they occurred in 43 crashes, because you'll see that number 35 here involves 2 people. This is, I'm not going to get too closely into this in this slide because the council member read the names at the beginning. But I will mention that there is another unusual data type this year, which is fatalities that occur on private property, which are number 38 and 39. So now, as this point, well, I will give an update on the 6 priority areas of the Vision Zero Action Plan. And 2 of these sections will be given by other presenters. So the first section is to build robust data analytics tools, and there's been good progress in this area. We had been working on an RFP-like process called Startup in Residence through the city, otherwise known as STIR. And through STIR, we have selected Urban Logic as the contractor for this area, and they were notified in November. And so this month we are working on the scope development. And the R in STIR is residency. So the way this program works, we will have them have a residency with us for the first 3 months of next year, roughly speaking. I don't know if it exactly will start on January 1, but it probably will start in January. And then once we sort of accept the results of their residency, we'll begin a 1-year contract with them and have the option to extend it to a total of 3 years. And we have worked with them before through a pilot project in, I believe, 2018, 2019. And so they made a dashboard for us, which is shown on the bottom left. But since that time, they've made a lot of improvements in the way they display data, such as the sort of idea of what a representation could look at on the bottom right of this slide. Forming a Vision Zero task force, as we are all here. Welcome to the second one, and the theme of this one is outreach. The next one will be on March 5th, 2021, which is a Friday, and its theme will be data. And then the following one, also a Friday, will be June 4th, 2021, and we're working on the theme for that one. So I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Anaya from the San Jose Police Department to present this slide.
Hi, good morning. So first off, on our current slide, for this one, I would like to talk about some of the enforcement activity we're doing here in Traffic Enforcement Unit. Our meetings don't necessarily align with our quarters here at the Police Department, so I try to provide you the most up-to-date on the second quarter. So I give you a progress report here on the second quarter, which is reporting from on the slide, which would be October 1st to December 5th. So as we're looking today, or as of the 5th, we've written 630 citations and issued about 416 warnings here through the traffic enforcement unit. You might wonder how that compares to Q1. So Q1, we had 414 cites written and 1,860 approximately warnings during that first quarter, which is July through September. So we're changing our method of deployment based on COVID restrictions, countywide restrictions, and things of that nature to keep our officers safe and to also keep the traveling public safe when it comes to contact and minimizing contact as best we can. So our message initially on the first quarter, that's why you see the citations a little bit lower on the first quarter, was due to restricted activities from our officers as well as the public. And we moved to more of an enforcement model on Q2. And so our citations are increasing and our warnings are decreasing as a result of that. So we're constantly flexing based on what the county is doing with countywide COVID protocol and contact for the officers. And again, it's keeping the traveling public safe as well as our officers when it comes to COVID and being as safe as we possibly can. We look at some of the things that we're doing. We had a DUI checkpoint on the 22nd of November. We also have an upcoming DUI checkpoint tomorrow evening. And so those are some of the things we're doing after hours in the traffic unit for our enforcement activities as well as education. Fight the Spike campaign, which is next on the list. That's continued efforts again with DOT, with campaign type signage on the Vision Zero corridors, as well as us going out once those signs are put out for a week or so. And we're coordinating with them to go out and do after hours enforcement and education for the public, and which would include citations and warnings and so on and so forth. And just again, educating the traveling public on their driving habits, driving behavior, looking for the common, the common violations out there that are causing the most of our fatalities, which are stop signs and stop lights and speed and distracted driving and things of that nature. So we're continuing to enforce those types of violations, and then also educating the public on what they're doing, what they can do better to be safe out there on the roadways, especially during darkness. And that's really what Fight the Spike is about, is that transitional time frame from daylight savings when we're now traveling and it is darker out, for them to realize what they're doing, how they can be safer and keeping their lights on and all those things. So that's a continuing thing what we're doing with DOT. Little progress on updating our analytics software and hardware, for that matter, here at the police department. We're constantly looking at better ways to achieve some of the data that Vision Zero is looking for. And what we found is we are deficient in that department. So we're looking at new software and new hardware, for that matter, for our officers to write citations and issue citations, and also eventually moving towards automating our 555 data, which is our accident reporting data for analytics, both internally here at the PD and externally with DOT, so they can look at our reports a little bit easier, and we can get the data that they need to properly analyze what's going on with the accidents, and looking at some of the things that now we're utilizing humans to analyze this data, when we can with the assistance of new software, we can provide that data much more quickly. So we're currently looking at vendors and working with vendors and getting presentations on a couple of different products. We recently issued cell phones to all officers on the department, which will help them in the issuance of citations and collecting that data. And we're also looking at things that software-wise that will integrate well with our current report writing system and our current report writing software. So those are things that are important to us when we're looking at this internally, things that I'm working on with our systems development unit. And eventually here we'll go out to RFP so we can figure out exactly which vendor we're going to use. So those are things that we're working on internally with regards to software and analytics. And then onto the traffic enforcement unit and our staffing update, which is something we are talking about quite often. I recently presented on this to the city council. So I know Councilman Perales, you've kind of heard a little of this, but I do want to update the rest of the group. We're looking at deploying or moving towards a 2-team staffing model. One of the big things that we look at internally is that we do have a void in the evening hours for our commute time and some of the enforcement during the evening. So as we progress and as the department fills vacancies and fills voids, we're looking at potentially moving an additional sergeant into traffic and 1 additional officer. And what that would do, and it doesn't sound like much, but that allows me as a program manager to look at the unit and actually delineate, instead of having 1 team of 11 officers, it allows me to have 2 teams, hence 2 sergeants, and have 2 6-man teams where we can do a deployment in a modified swing shift type hour, and then still also cover our morning and daytime commute with our day shift team. So eventually we're looking at moving towards those types of the deployment model internally, but again, staffing will dictate how quickly I can do that. I know it's a priority from our chief's office, and they're looking into it as we get officers, and there is vacancies everywhere, as everyone knows. So it's again, it's a prioritization between our patrol function, our Bureau of Investigations, other special operations units that are looking for officers, but I know it is a priority. And so we're looking at a timeline from within the next year or so to hopefully move to that type of a model. And again, as these officers become available, the chiefs are constantly reevaluating how we can deploy better and to better serve the community. We have procured sufficient equipment, so we are online to, once we expand, we have the motorcycles, we have the equipment, we have the things in place already, so we won't be chasing that equipment portion of it, and we won't be behind the 8 ball. If we do get to staffing, we are ready to deploy them as quickly as possible once that staffing moves into place. So you'll kind of see that start to move towards that direction as we get our staffing moved up. And that's essentially it for the police department. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, I do see our Vice Chair Foley has her hand up.
Thank you. Thank you, Lieutenant Anaya. Good presentation. I appreciate it. I just had a question for you, or an ask. One question and an ask. You talked about the number of citations and warnings. I see it on the slide for the last couple of months. But in future task force meetings, would it be possible to have the year-to-date information? Because as you were going through them, I was trying to write them down, but I didn't get them. So I'm wondering if you could give those to me again so I can keep track of it a little bit better. But in future reports, if you could have the year-to-date numbers so we understand where the scope of the number of citations being issued and the number of warnings.
Absolutely. And I apologize for that. I initially wasn't going to give comparative stats for Q1, but I think it's important for all of us to understand, because we are in such flux with COVID, it is a difficult task, and it's hard to compare quarter to quarter. And I think I just wanted to put that out, and I apologize for not having that. So for Q1, I know you have the Q2 up there, up to date, as up to at least December 5th. So for Q1, I'll repeat that really quick. Q1, we issued 414 citations, and for warnings, we issued 1,865.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. 8.
Yep. And so what happens, and maybe
is that, how does that, go ahead. I'm wondering how that compares for prior years.
Well, so we are issuing a lot more warnings now than we ever have. And part of that is because of minimizing contact with the public. And what I mean by that, to give you an example, if an officer stops a violator on the roadway, that officer has to have direct contact at the window, number one, with the violator to explain why they were stopped and all the legalities of a traffic stop, right, with the police officer. And then they have to interact by getting a driver's license, a registration, a proof of insurance, and all that physical documentation. Then they take that information back to their motorcycle or police car, and then they will issue a citation and write that citation out. Either write it on a paper citation, or as most officers in our unit do, they utilize a tablet. Every one of the officers in our unit uses a tablet on a day-to-day basis. So what happens is now they have another item that they have to interact with the violator with, and that being almost an iPad-like device, for lack of a better term, with a stylus where they have to sign that citation. So what happens is we are issuing more warnings to minimize all of that contact and interaction with a physical device, and the driver's license and the registration. And again, it's a safety issue, not only for the officers, but a safety for the public. So we transition to more of a warning-based or educational-based, I like to use. I mean, we use the term warning, but essentially a car stop, in every case, whether you're getting a citation or not, it's the ultimate goal is to correct behavior. And so if we go out there on an educational piece where we're not interacting with all of that physical information, if you will, or physical devices, and we still get our point across to get people to slow down, it's a success either way. And so what we really moved from was the super egregious violations to more citing more of the public that are committing the day-to-day violations. I mean, we were doing speeding citations. We're saying, okay, well, let's let people get away with a little more than normal, right? Because we want to minimize that contact. However, we are going to stop them and we are going to educate them on what they're doing. So we've transitioned a little bit, if you will, back to more of the citation-based model, which is what we've done in the past.
Great. I appreciate that. And then just to confirm the number of officers you have in the traffic enforcement unit, what's the current number of officers? It sounds like you want to hire another sergeant, but where are we as of today? What's the number of officers in that unit?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So right now we are at 11 officers.
Okay.
And this is the enforcement side now, because I'm going to stick to enforcement because that's really what we're talking about. The
Sure.
enforcement side, we have 11 officers and 1 sergeant.
Okay.
So my goal, and again, this is a short-term goal because I do want to be able to provide the community with the service that we think they need. And that initial addition of 1 sergeant and 1 officer would give me really the bare bones minimum to split into 2 teams.
Okay.
And that's kind of what the direction we're looking at going.
Okay. Thank you. That's it. I appreciate it. Good information.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands from our task force members.
Great. I'll continue. So for the 4th area, increased community outreach and engagement, the theme of this meeting is outreach. So we're very excited to engage everyone on this topic and later on discuss opportunities for possible collaboration in the future. But in addition to that, we have the Vision Zero Strategic Communications RFP, which is one of the key areas of the Vision Zero Action Plan, and it is currently posted at the website that's shown on screen right now. So if anyone watching this meeting is aware of any consultants who may be interested to apply, please send them to that website. The closing date is January 8th, 2021. And then we'll be going through a process to evaluate all of the bids that are sent in, and we expect that consultant to begin in spring or summer 2021. A lot of the idea behind discussing outreach before they start is to make it possible for them to, begin with a running start. So we're quite excited for this conversation today. In this general area, in terms of our current work, we also wanted to mention a campaign that we call Fight the Spike, basically referring to the typical spike in fatalities we tend to see during daylight savings time, which is now and lasts from November to March. We are doing 5 deployments of changeable message signs, which are the type of sign you see on the bottom right image. And so they say things like slow down in English and Spanish. And they will be placed on the 17 Vision Zero corridors over 5 different deployments. And we are coordinating this effort with the San Jose Police Department on traffic enforcement, specifically speeding. And we're also working with the County Roads and Airports Department to include the 2 Vision Zero corridors, which are in the 2 Vision Zero corridors, which are county expressways. And so we're also rolling out an image that you see on the top right of this slide that says, look out when it's dark out. And this will be in 3 languages. And we're interested in finding we'll be working with council offices on this effort. So I'm now going to turn it over to Vu Dao from DOT to discuss the quick build safety improvements.
Thank you, Jesse, Mr. Chairman, Council Member Foley, members of the task force. Quick build strategy in traffic safety means using temporary low-cost material to construct safety improvements, and they typically include paint for striping, plastic delineators, roadway signage, and minor signal modification. And quick build project can be built relatively quickly and much more affordable comparing to capital improvement project that can be very expensive and it can take years to plan, design, and build. And as part of the Vision Zero Action Plan adoption early this year, Council allocated funding for us to implement quick build improvements on the first 11 miles of the priority safety corridors. The first major corridor improvement under this effort is Center Road, where work has already started. Fruitdale Avenue is next, with Story Road currently under design. But we are not just focusing on corridor, we are also making improvements at specific high-risk locations where the data leads us to them. We will be making improvements at the Guadalupe River Trail underpasses, where unfortunately 2 cyclists died this year. We also will be making improvement at Silver Creek and Daniel Maloney intersection, where there is a high frequency of pedestrian crashes. The 2 future planned corridors currently in planning is Hillsdale Avenue and also Branham Lane. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of quick build improvements that we have completed recently at 3 locations in the Guadalupe, Washington neighborhood, just south of downtown San Jose. The top left image shows a left turn calming treatment where we install plastic bottles at the center line adjacent to the crosswalk to slow down left turn movement in this location where pedestrians are competing with the left turns drivers. So this will slow down the drivers and make it safer for pedestrian crossing at this crosswalk. The bottom left image is an example of curb extension where we use plastic bottles again and striping to tighten up the corner to slow down the right turn drivers and enhance visibility for pedestrians. The bottom right image shows an enhanced crosswalk where we upgrade the standard crosswalk to ladder design to clearly delineate the spacing for pedestrians. We also did a minor signal programming change to allow pedestrians to enter the intersection prior to giving the green indicator to the drivers, and that makes it safer for pedestrian crossing at this crosswalk. So these are examples of quick build improvements that we have done recently and will continue to do to make it safer for pedestrians. So in summary, we are making a progress in this effort. We will continue to implement safety projects following this model, and we believe that quick build can reduce the risk for people walking, biking, and driving, hence will reduce the number of fatal and severe injuries, crashes on our roadway. Thank you for the opportunity. Back to you, Jesse.
Thank you, Vu. So the last area is to discuss prioritizing resources on high-KSI corridors and districts. And obviously we discussed data analytics, very important. When we have the abilities, once that consultant is on, it'll help us inform the project locations and prioritizations. And we also do that now to some extent with using GIS internally. But I also wanted to talk a little bit more about the project that Vu just mentioned, which is the Guadalupe, Washington project. That came in as a community request, where there was a request to do pedestrian safety improvements and look at speeding in the neighborhood. And we looked at the whole area and we used data to prioritize which intersections to make improvements. So we ranked the intersections by injury frequency, and then we prioritized the pedestrian injuries and fatalities that we had in the data to select the 3 locations where that project was based. Vu also mentioned that earlier in 2020, we mentioned this at the last meeting, we had 2 very unusual fatalities, which are bike-on-bike fatalities. Those have never been recorded in San Jose before. And so we worked with the Parks Department who manages the trails. And so this is a good example of the type of partnering that we can do through the task force working with other departments to install quick build on the trails. And installed these signs, which you can see here. These were installed in November 2020, so just very recently. And we prioritized, there were two locations we prioritized, at least for this first one, the higher KSI district, which is District 3, but we are still planning to do this type of treatment at the other location in District 4. So now that's the end of this section, and I'll turn it back to the council member.
Thank you very much. And I do see a hand. We have Rhonda McClinton Brown.
Yeah, hi, I have a question going back, and I'm sorry, I've been listening, but I had a question going back for you, Jesse. In the fatalities or the accidents that happened on property that was unusual, were those commercial properties or residential properties?
They were commercial properties. They were 2 properties on Story Road. They were, I believe they were both malls that have parking,
Like in shopping
private parking
centers.
lots. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the Story Road corridor is a real area of focus. I think that there's so much traffic there. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands going up from our panelists. I did neglect to, after I called for roll in the beginning, I did neglect to at least introduce those that were here. We're running a little bit behind schedule, so I'm just going to run down the list, and next time, the next task force meeting, we'll let you introduce yourselves. So you already know our vice chair is here, Pam Foley. From the city of San Jose, we have John Risto, our director of Department of Transportation. From our police department, we have Deputy Chief Heather Randall and Lieutenant Anaya. From the fire department, we actually have our fire chief today sitting in, Chief Robert Sapien. From the city of San Jose Public Works, we have Michelle Kimball. From the city of San Jose Economic Development, we have Sal Alvarez. From the city of San Jose Housing Department, we have Reagan Henninger. From BTA, Angelique Guetta. We have from County Roads and Airports, Harry Freitas. The County Public Health, Rhonda McClinton Brown. In our County Office of Education, Marianne Duan. Cal Walks, Nikita Sinha. Silicon Valley Bike Coalition, John Cordes. And from AARP, we have Fred Buzo. And not with us today from the County Medical Examiner corner, Michelle Jordan. And City of San Jose Planning Department, Michael Brio. And City of San Jose Parks, Neil Ruffino, who are also on the task force. And so now, let me check back to make sure, yeah, no other hands. Okay, so now we will move into our outreach session. Thank you, Jesse, and our other presenters. So now to continue on outreach, please join me in welcoming Christina Arpante, the Assistant Director of Creative Impact and Public Affairs at the County Office of Education, Nikita Sinha from WAC San Jose Program, WAC San Jose Program Manager, Fred Buzo, Associate State Director for AARP, and Lauren Ledbetter, VTA's Bicycle and Pedestrian Program Manager. Each will have 10 minutes to present the outreach strategies at their agencies and how the City of San Jose can collaborate with those efforts. And again, task force members, please save your questions for the end of the presentations, but as we will have a lengthy time to be able to discuss, and then you can use the raise hand feature. Welcome, and I believe Christina's first up.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me. As you mentioned, I'm Dr. Christina Arpante, the Assistant Director of Creative Impact and Public Affairs at the Santa Clara County Office of Education. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Thank you so much for having me join you today. And again, thank you for Dr. Marianne Dewan for having me as well. So I'd like to begin, if you would indulge me for a few minutes. Next slide. There is a quote I'd like to begin this presentation with. Unity is strength. When there is teamwork and collaboration, wonderful things can be achieved. I'd like you to just take a moment to think to yourself, what does this quote mean to you and your role and the role of this task force? What words resonate with you? And it's just a quiet personal reflection as we talk about outreach. So your personal reflections are going to be really important as we move forward as a collective with this outreach. Next slide. And to continue with that, those reflections, I'd like you now to think about the work of the task force, and think about what is the one word you want others to say about your service and support. So we often do this with our professional learning or in any kind of opportunities. I did this as a professional learning facilitator as well as a principal. I'd start at the beginning of the year and say, okay, what do I want people to come away with? And that's how I would plan my meetings and my sessions. So I'm not sure if this is possible, but if you'd like to indulge me in popcorning, maybe unmuting yourself and thinking about a word that comes to mind, that would be great. Is that possible? So again, what is the one word that you want others to say about your service or support with this task force?
Authentic.
Thank you.
Inclusive.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Collaborative.
Thank you. Great. So authentic, inclusive, and collaborative. Thank you. So as we continue today, I'd like you to have these words in the back of your mind, as well as any other words that may come to mind that were not voiced out loud, but maybe personally in your reflections. So thank you again for that. And we'll come back to these three words in just a moment. Next slide. So with that, as a reminder, the Santa Clara County Office of Education is a state regional service agency that's led by Dr. Mary Ann Dewan, our County Superintendent of Schools, and who is, again, a member of this task force. Her transformational leadership encourages, inspires, and motivates staff, community, and partners to innovate and create change. Such authentic leadership is paramount as we as an organization at the SCCOE provides instructional, business and technology services to our 31 school districts, as well as our own programs and initiatives and beyond within the community. Next slide. So how does this connect to my presence here today? I've joined the group via the Outreach Working Group, which we met and we began to lay the groundwork for collaboration. And after an initial meeting and discussions with Jesse and Anna and other colleagues, our initial ideas, which by no means are static or set in stone, are likely to fall into the following buckets at this time. So I thought about community outreach and communication, district and school-based content, as well as development and production services. So what do I mean by community outreach and communication? And again, what we welcome dialogue and communication. As far as today is concerned, I wanted to begin with information sharing and collaborative content development. Specifically with information sharing, our offices engage in several outreach opportunities, including several and regular calls and email communications and meetings with our district public information officers. And these PIOs are really a direct through line from our office to our school districts and their respective communities. Whether the information sharing is urgent or a heads up, they're really extremely responsive and collaborative to get the information out there. In addition, Dr. Dewan engages in regularly engaging in our district with our district superintendents and has regular e-communications. The assistant superintendents of the districts also meet regularly. And then we are increasing our social media presence as well. Our department in the communications department, we have a weekly newsletter that we call the COVID Weekly Roundup. And that includes the latest information and events, not only with what's going on with COVID, but also in and around the organization, as well as community information and information for our parents. So one thing I was thinking about as far as outreach, with regular information and initiatives that are going on, the possibility of including a Vision Zero section actually in our newsletter that popped up when I was planning this. And then, with planning after we come out of the COVID loop, really continuing that month, the communication and e-newsletter, not just stopping it. And like I mentioned, also social media. So that's another huge area of collaboration with posting with, in conjunction with, or for our partners. Which brings me to the next possibility of collaborative content development. So with social media specifically, we have begun to create social media toolkits that have gone out to our public information officers. There are different levels of the toolkit. So we have monthly toolkits, which highlight different events or holidays or special somethings that are going on during the month. So for instance, this month is Human Rights Month, and we have our different holidays and celebrations, especially with COVID reminders. We also have FYIs, so we have digital learning, safety, social emotional learning. So there's a really great opportunity to collaborate with the different agencies here to create toolkits. We also have opportunities to support and collaborate with webinar and meeting hosts. We do have, like many of you, we have large meeting accounts with Zoom, and we have streaming opportunities, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, and we're happy to support with that as well, especially getting out to our communities and our parents. Next slide. And speaking of content for specific with districts, in our meetings with the outreach, I've heard, and we talk about many times where your teams are going out to the schools, virtually or otherwise, and presenting to classes and kids. And we have a really robust group of experts in our professional learning and instructional support division that provides leadership and professional learning and instructional opportunities. Especially with curriculum and college and career and technical education skills and parent engagement. So as your teams really think about this development, our experts here really can help with those connections to the state standards, the cross content. So, even when we're talking about speed and, even all grades, K-12, we can go to calculus and the slope intercept and the velocity and all that kind of stuff. Really making explicit content connections, as well as ensuring that we have access, we provide access for our English language learners and students who are receiving our special education services. As well as we do have a parent engagement and support services section or group, as well as distance learning strategies. Next slide. And then the other part that I wanted to mention was our production services. We have 2 graphic designers, 2 production techs, and a full print service shop here that we are happy to collaborate with. We can talk about timelines and planning and purchase orders and that type of thing. But we have worked a lot in the past and are currently working with our partners with different, whether it's the data book or, currently our office is creating some public service announcements, and we do a lot of work to support our LGBTQ youth and equity. So there's also opportunity with that as well. Last slide. So while this is a short presentation and there's a lot to cover, really the possibilities are endless. And I know that our office is happy to chat further with anybody who would like to ideate or share potential opportunities and that maybe popped in your mind as I was talking, and really thinking about going back to those words that you mentioned earlier of collaborative, inclusive, and authentic. And really whatever our next steps are, keeping those words in mind. So as we connect we really come together and model how we are stronger together. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. And I believe next up is Nikita.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm going to share just a little bit about some of the work that we did with the Department of Transportation earlier this year. So my name is Nikita Sinha. I'm the Walk San Jose Program Manager with California Walks. We're a nonprofit organization who works statewide as a voice for pedestrian safety and walkable communities. And in San Jose, our Walk San Jose program serves to locally uphold that same vision. Next slide, please. So with the city's Department of Transportation, through the 2019 to 2020 cycle of funding from the California Office of Traffic Safety, we were able to complete a senior safety outreach program earlier this year, primarily over the summer. So I'll talk a little bit about how we adopted some of our outreach strategies in March and moving forward with shelter in place to meet the needs of our audience. So the image on the slide here is our one of our key goals from the project, which was a safe walking tips resource, which was intended to be a rack card as a leave behind in community centers. One of the first things that we did was adapt this to include a couple COVID related tips, including wearing a mask and social distancing, but more importantly, to use the reverse side of the flyer as an outreach strategy, as a flyer to be distributed with information on our safety education presentations. And so there was two main reasons that we wanted to do this. One is that we wanted to be able to distribute a resource widely that anybody who received the resource in a sense also receive the contents of the presentation. So you don't have to have a computer or a laptop or a cell phone to be able to receive the same information. And then the second was that we wanted to also do outreach on the presentations in a way that was not reliant on electronic resources. So these were distributed with a massive amount of help from the PRNS department through their senior meal distribution program through the community centers. So these went out to hundreds of seniors in San Jose through 12 community centers. We also adapted the presentations. Originally, we had intended to be able to go to the community centers to talk during the senior nutrition program, and those were turned into an online Zoom presentation. So we delivered 15 presentations. We also delivered 3 virtual walk audits. So originally we had intended to be able to work with a small group of seniors at each community center to do a walk audit, ideally around the community center or around the senior housing site, to be able to do an assessment of safety needs in areas where seniors are frequently visiting. Instead, what we did was we worked with 3 different neighborhood associations on virtual walk audits using primarily Zoom and the Google Maps Street View feature, as well as photos and videos from the site, which we took beforehand. So through that, we were still able to pull together a significant amount of feedback on the safety needs of the older adult population specifically, despite the challenges of not being able to meet in person. Next slide, please. So a couple of our main lessons learned on the online outreach side. The first thing is that we didn't want to rely completely on just electronic distribution or online outreach. So that was the main reason that we turned our safety resource into a flyer to be distributed physically. We also talked about potentially in the future using mailers or even radio as a way to reach people who we may have been able to reach in person, but don't have the same access to technology. We also wanted to highlight the need to connect with existing networks. So in this project, connecting with neighborhood associations, parent-teacher associations, as well as the libraries and the community centers was a massive benefit. So allowed us to tap into these networks that already exist, as we were also trying to reach new people as well. And then the last thing, the main lesson learned, and this just goes for any outreach in general, is to know your audience. So for us, it was really important. There was a lot of trial and error, but it was really important for us to get a better understanding of what are the languages that people need interpretation for in different parts of the city or in different community centers or housing sites. What are the accessibility needs, including do people need live ASL translation? Do they need closed captioning for our videos or our presentations? Or do they need transcripts or even notes provided afterwards? And then also to understand the technology limitations, which is why having some sort of physical distribution is also really important. Next slide, please. And lastly, I just wanted to share an image and some information on our recent World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims event, which happened on November 17th. So this is an event that happens annually to honor and remember the people who have died on our streets. And I want to say thank you to Councilmember Peralez and Councilmember Foley for reading the names at the beginning of this meeting, and for committing to doing that moving forward. That's incredibly meaningful. So this event, what you see in the image in front of you is an image of 250 pairs of shoes, one to signify each traffic fatality in San Jose over the past 5 years, or just under 5 years actually, from January 1st, 2016 to November 17th, 2020. So we wanted to, even though it was a relatively small event, and we maintained social distancing, we wanted to still have this event, especially having this image and this visual, because we wanted to make the point that even with everything going on, the challenges, the incredible challenges that we're facing this year, this is still a reality. This is still happening. I think some of the points that Jesse brought up earlier this meeting are incredibly significant as well, to see that even though there's been lower traffic, we're not yet sure that there's going to be a significant drop in our fatalities or severe injuries. This is still a reality and still something that demands our attention at every moment. I want to say thank you to Councilmember Peralez and Foley for attending and for speaking, as well as to DOT Director John Risto for attending and for your support. And most importantly, I want to say thank you to the families who made this event happen, who continue to show up and share their stories, and for their continued advocacy, because it's just incredible every time to hear from them. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita. And the next up is Fred Buzo.
Hello, my name is Fred Buzo. I'm an Associate State Director for AARP California, but based here in San Jose. Been a resident here for over 20 years now and live in Councilmember Foley's district. So I am a constituent of Councilmember Foley as well. Next slide. So look, like everybody else, COVID-19 hit us hard. In many, many different ways. Disproportionate impact on older adults. We had to go from, in 2019, doing 5% of our events and meetings and things like that online to now nearly 100% online. And nevertheless, communities around the country kept telling us, including San Jose, that they were committed to addressing the needs of older adults in different ways, right? I mean, you had such an impact on older adults in terms of the virus, whether it was, the health impacts themselves or sheltering in place and what results come from that, meaning social isolation and things of that nature. So, but communities around the country were telling us that they wanted to do what they could to help out. Next slide. These are some of the statements that we were hearing from folks. So self-isolation is a key term here, but also, there's a tremendous need for connections to recreation, to nature. Access to the internet and technology have been a barrier. Walkability, aging in place, and communication infrastructure are higher priorities now more than ever. Pandemic has shown us how we need to improve communication system to get critical information to all town residents. So, or all city residents. And this is sort of something that's happening across the country. I know the city's been dealing with it as well. But we've been seeing this play out all over the place. Next slide. So what did we do, right? We did what a lot of folks did. I mean, we did because it was something that was new to us. It was a new situation that we had to deal with rather quickly. We turned to social media, whether it was Twitter, Facebook. We conducted a lot of Zoom meetings now, Facebook Live events. And, the reception has been mixed, quite frankly. We've had a hard time connecting with our members in the way that we used to connect with them in the past, because in the past, we would do a lot of more sort of what folks might call old-fashioned types of events, right? In-person events is now sort of, folks, even now, it seems like a million years ago that we were going out to community events and talking to people and shaking hands and just talking about the issues that are important to them in person. Telephone, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Direct mail, things of that nature. So we did these things, these new types of methods in order to try to reach our members, but we were and we still are having a hard time. Next slide. And this is one of the reasons why we're having a hard time, is as folks get older, as you can imagine, this is from a study that was done in 2019 out of UC Berkeley. So this is statewide, but you'll see as folks get older, they're either more, they are more unconnected to the internet. And while those numbers are shrinking, it's still a pretty significant number. And so moving to this virtual world has been difficult, and this is one of the reasons why it has been difficult. So this is just connectivity, period. This doesn't even go into, hey, I have an internet connection. How do I use my computer? How do I use my iPad? How do I get onto Zoom? So it doesn't go into training. It doesn't go into access itself, whether it's hotspots or I have a cell phone, but my cell phone service is spotty and that sort of thing. It doesn't go into devices. Hey, I might have an internet connection, but a really old device that I bought in 1995 or something like that. So it's all connected here, right? Connectivity is connected to the ability to do outreach and engagement in this era that we're in, that we find ourselves in. Next slide. So old is new, and I did talk about this a little bit in mentioning sort of teletown halls, and I do literally mean teletown halls with your telephone. And so AARP has the ability to do teletown halls. We've been doing it for decades now. But again, it really depends on how many folks you want to reach. It's not something that we want to do all of the time. So, and the issue has to be important enough and to attract large numbers in order for the teletown hall to be, worth it, so to speak. So we've had teletown halls on COVID, for example. Well, of course, those are going to get a lot of folks because that's a front and center issue right now. We've had teletown halls on fraud, for example, which is also big, like 24/7, 365 days a year. It's a huge issue. And those will get big, big people or big numbers. Direct mail, we also have the ability to do direct mail. I mean, we have close to 70,000 members in San Jose. But again, with direct mail, because I work for a state office, AARP at the national level, sure, folks know about the magazine, they get the bulletin, which looks like the old Parade magazine, which I'm dating myself there, but direct mail at the state level, we have the ability to do direct mail, but not that often. So when we do direct mail, it has to be, it's almost like a one-shot deal per year. And so it's got to be a really, really good message. And it has to be on something that is like absolutely important to that community. And so direct mail's there. Spatially distanced in-person offerings, when they are permitted. This year, we did see a little bit of that, actually. I know, maybe we don't think about it in those terms, but I do think about like closing off San Pedro Street, for example. I know there are plans that were adopted in the budget to do movie nights in parks and stuff like that, hopefully in 2021. But at those kinds of events, how can we show up there without actually, quote, showing up? Like even if we still can't shake hands and talk to people in person close up, how do we show up at these places? And then here it says creative virtual offerings, but really it should have said creative virtual offerings. That was my mistake, because I kind of felt like back when being on Zoom and doing all of these online meetings was sort of cool and different, we were more creative about it. Now it's just sort of like, well, I got to get on this Zoom meeting and I'll, put the camera on here and there, and I'll move, turn off my mute when I have to, and things like that. And I just felt like we've kind of gone away from being creative when it comes to virtual offerings. At least at AARP, I know we're starting to think about what can we do to be more creative in the future, because what we're doing now, we just aren't getting as much a response as we would want to. And then as Nikita message, and it's not in this slide, is radio and television, which again is an old form of community outreach and engagement in many ways. And so I think this next year, we are going to really try to see what we can do more on radio and on television to get messages out that are important to older adults. And with that, though, I think overall the message is that we're going to have to create a better narrative around pedestrian safety, because one thing that we're seeing, whether it comes to housing, whether it comes to even healthcare, when it comes to long-term care facilities, facts. It's really, I know this is going to be hard, not so popular sometimes, but the data sometimes is not compelling. Just using data as your narrative sometimes just does not attract folks to the events and to the whether they're online or not, does not attract them to that event. And so I think we all need to do a better job. And I don't have that answer, but I do think we need to do a better job at creating a narrative around pedestrian safety that attracts more people to learn about it, and to learn about things like Vision Zero, because it is important. And we are seeing this play out all over the country in terms of fatalities and older adults who are severely injured. So, I am obviously, I'm willing to work with folks who have ideas. Please let me know. Unfortunately, I did not put my contact information on here like Nikita, but you can contact Jesse, and he can provide you with my contact information. I've worked with Jesse and Councilmember Perales on this issue, and so I look forward to working with everyone else on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. And I think last up is Lauren Ledbetter.
Great. Thank you for inviting us to present on this. So I'm a senior transportation planner at VTA. I manage the bicycle and pedestrian program, and I have 4 short slides, and I'm going to talk about the outreach efforts that VTA leads that are related to safety. And I just wanted to preface this by saying that the efforts that we do are multi-departmental within VTA. It includes our system safety and security, our outreach team, marketing, and then my bicycle and pedestrian program. So the first item I want to highlight is our countywide bicycle and pedestrian safety campaign. In 2021, we're going to be launching a county-wide safety campaign focused on reducing behaviors that contribute to bicyclists and pedestrians being seriously injured or killed. And this effort is funded through the 2016 Measure B sales tax. We're collaborating with the county public health department on developing and reviewing the data. As you know, I'm sure over the last few years, the public health department has released a series of data briefs looking at traffic crashes in the county. Their epidemiologists are actually looking at the various data sources to identify potential target audiences and identify specific risky behaviors that we want to address in the campaign. We're also coordinating closely with the Vision Zero program in San Jose and looking for ways that we can support each other's efforts. As one example, since both VTA and the county plan on hiring a consultant to help with the respective safety campaigns, and the scope of work is really similar, the city has agreed to release an RFP for a cooperative agreement, which would permit VTA and other agencies within Santa Clara County to hire and use the same consultant that the city selects without having to go through their own separate procurement process. You can go to the next slide. So we conduct a rail safety campaign every September in conjunction with Rail Safety Month. This past fall, we posted several blogs. We promoted it heavily on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. We also sent some news releases to the media, and one station did a quick story on the safety campaign, and they interviewed our public information officer for that. In addition to the social media channels, we also posted messaging on our light rail digital signs and the triptych screens at the BART stations in Milpitas and Berryessa. Go to the next slide. Great. Also, this year, we'll be launching an ongoing series of adult bicycle education courses. This year, I guess next year, 2021. We will be issuing a request for proposals soon to seek a team to help deliver those for us. The program is building on a successful pilot that we hosted in 2018. The courses will include a classroom session, and depending on how the pandemic shelter in place restrictions if they get eased, we'll have some on-bike training as well. And the goal is to teach adults how to ride safely in traffic. The courses will follow a national curriculum authored by the League of American Bicyclists. We will also be offering courses in other languages, most likely Spanish. As part of this effort, we'll also sponsor bicycle maintenance classes and develop up to 3 short PSAs that explain specific bike safety topics. That is also funded by 2016 Measure B funds. And finally, go to the next slide. This is my last slide. We have a senior outreach program that provides resources and information to seniors about their transit options. This is integrated into our budget, just an ongoing program. It's run through our outreach team. With COVID, obviously, there's been a change in the way we conduct this outreach. It's currently virtual. We have some mini presentations on our website. One of the presentations is on safety information and tips, and the other is on using public transit during this time of extreme caution. We also have other following senior programs, which we did conduct in person prior to the COVID pandemic, a Train the Trainer Academy, where we offer training to senior volunteers and service providers on how to help older adults use public transportation. For this training, we use the classroom, and we also have on-bus training to make sure the participants, or to equip the trainers so that they can assist older adults in using public transportation. And then we also have something called a daycation. It's a small group training where we host a morning training, and it's immediately followed by a guided trip using our public transit services. We bring the people to entertainment or shopping venues of their choice within the county, and this allows the participants to be oriented and familiarized with the way public transportation works. And then if someone would like further training, we would then refer them to the community partners and who provide one-on-one travel training. So with that, I'll close. And thank you very much for allowing us to share some of the work that we do at VTA.
Thank you very much to all of our presenters. That is the end of our presentations for the day. We will now open it up for task force member discussion in regards to the 4 presentations we just had. And if you are a member of our public, please raise your hand, because after our task force members have spoken, we will kick it over to you. And sometimes it takes a little bit for task force members to jump in. So I might jump over to you and then come back to the task force members as well. And I just wanted to kick it off myself with a little bit of a theme of kind of what I was hearing. So number one, I think without a doubt, COVID-19 has had a tremendous impact in how all of us are doing outreach, and certainly not being able to outreach in person has been a major setback. But at the same time, I think we've always coupled the in-person outreach with a number of different other methods. And I think we heard those today, and I think a better use of those as we move forward is going to be important. And one of the things that I have taken from outreach experiences this year with COVID and on the council is that I think we should always marry a good collaboration between our in-person meetings and opportunities that we can present online. Because I think we certainly have seen a positive impact with people being able to participate virtually and not necessarily having to travel outside of their house to go to an in-person meeting. And so I think for us on the council, it's going to be something that we want to actually do a combination of the two as we get out of this pandemic. Another thing, and I really think one of the areas I'd like to see if we could focus some of the conversation is just how do we collaborate with this outreach? As you saw in the presentations that we all saw, there are a lot of different materials going out, different priorities, but if we think about it under this umbrella of what we're all messaging, and certainly if we utilize the Vision Zero umbrella, I think there are ways that we can collaborate. We're already doing it, but I think there's ways we can do it better. Certainly, we're already doing it. Yesterday, I participated in the ART event. There was the Day of Remembrance, as Nikita pointed out, where there was some collaboration. But I think, hearing things from the presentations, I'm sensing that a lot of us may be speaking to the same audience, kind of a crossover audience, and I think that we can collaborate in ways to ensure that we're broadening that audience. One of the ways that I heard that I think we could make better use of would be radio, and especially multilingual, as we know that there are many of our potential audience members that are out there that are not going to get the messaging other ways. They're not going to join a Zoom meeting with us. They may not go to an in-person meeting or event. But they may be listening to radio, especially in their own language. And then when it comes to TV, I think something that was really compelling for me was at the California Walks event, Day of Remembrance, and just seeing the images of the children, of them playing with their favorite toys. You could see in the pictures, or maybe it was a birthday party picture. Those, I think, are tremendously impactful when you know that person is no longer with us. And so for me, I think, if we were to utilize TV, as Fred pointed out, statistics are not compelling. But I think, seeing human lives, especially young lives, are when those lives have been lost. And then lastly, the last kind of theme, I think, in correlation of I think the fact that we may have similar audiences, besides, I think, the County Office of Ed, which obviously can really focus on our students and our youth, but through California Walk, the ARP, even BTA, there's a real focus on this audience of potential victims. And I don't think there's really, from what I saw in the presentations, much focus on anybody else, which I'm not trying to recommend that that's good or bad, but it's just there is a large segment of our community that we're not necessarily messaging to. And those are the individuals a lot of times that are the ones that are causing some of these accidents, right? They're driving distracted, they're speeding, and they may not necessarily fall into the audience that we are targeting. And so I think we should be aware that there is a segment that that is out there that is not necessarily targeted in the audience, and there may be just opportunities for us to collaborate a little better to ensure we can have a broader audience. And so now I'll kick it over to our Vice Chair, Pam Foley.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Perales. I appreciate your comments and your focus, and I appreciate the 4 presentations that we had regarding outreach. And Nikita in particular, I want to thank you for emphasizing the print material in delivery to our seniors, because as Fred had the statistics to show, and you referenced, seniors aren't using technology as much as our younger folks are. So we need to be creative in how we're going to reach out to our senior adult, our older adults, as I'm trying to learn to call them, and not senior citizens. I don't like the term senior citizens as I head into that. It just makes me feel older than I feel that I really am. But I do see that 3 of you are focused on educating our senior population. So there seems to be an opportunity for collaboration there. I know, and through the council offices with our various ways that we outreach with our community. I know I had Fred speak at one of my town hall meetings on senior programs and AARP, and that was actually really well attended. But it is about making sure that you have creative approaches and a hook to bring people in to watch your video or to participate in your town hall meeting. One thing, and I think it was Lauren, I had a question for you, and this relates to your education classes for adult bike riders. I appreciate that you are working to educate adult bike riders, but I wonder if there's any emphasis on educating drivers, because they are as much causing the accidents as the bike riders who are trying to get out of their way. They're driving distracted, they're not paying attention, they're making that right-hand turn and not looking to see if there's a bicyclist over their shoulder. So is there any consideration, have you thought about how you might message that to our drivers?
Right, that's a great question, and I have the same questions and concerns. I agree with what you're saying. I would actually point to our countywide safety campaign. You'll notice I didn't say that we're going to be targeting bicyclists and pedestrian behavior. We're going to be identifying what the risky behavior is that results in severe and fatal collisions. And this may mean that we actually have a campaign that targets drivers and tells them to slow down, for example. So I think we're going at it in that way. There's also other ways that you can educate drivers in a classroom setting that other agencies and other organizations are doing. So that could be like diversion programs, where if someone gets a ticket for speeding, instead of having them pay the ticket, they can then go to a class to learn how to learn a little bit more about why it's important to drive more safely. So we're not supporting directly those efforts right now with VTA, but those types of efforts are can be funded through 2016 Measure B funds that the local agencies all have access to.
Great. I would love to see a campaign on educating our drivers, you know, be it billboards, be it radio, be it signs on poles, some way to continue to notify our drivers to pay attention to their surroundings as they are driving, not just speed. It's the right turn, it's the left turn, it's the rolling through a stop sign. So I really appreciate that. This was really good information, and I think the outreach is really, really important. we're ready. The council offices are always looking for content on how to get information out. And as I mentioned earlier, several of you are focused on seniors, and that is a priority in my council office too. So anything we can do to help distribute information that you have to our community, and even I'm thinking of a panel discussion maybe on traffic safety and how I might frame that so I get people to attend, but I also get some good information. So hopefully I can do something for that in the first quarter. But thank you so much. I appreciate hearing from the four of you and your efforts to inform our community and keep our pedestrians safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pam. And John, you are next, but I'm going to go over to Fred. I think he wanted to respond, and then potentially David Anaya, Lieutenant Anaya wanted to respond as well. But go ahead, Fred.
Yeah. So, Councilmember Foley, I'm really glad you brought that up, because yeah, it's the other statistic or that we don't talk about a lot in terms of Vision Zero is how as people get older and continue to drive, which is the case. I mean, studies will show that even folks who are 75 years and over, I mean, you've got close to 70% of those people still driving. And as they get older, traffic fatalities increase in terms of folks who die while driving. So it's not just pedestrians, it is older drivers as well. And AARP has recognized that for a while now. So we do have what's called a driver safety class. Those were in classes when COVID hit. It was all put on hold. We just started to release a virtual driver safety course. The good thing about the driver safety course is, one, it was super popular. Two, many times it'll actually lower your insurance rates. So you get that benefit as well. And then in addition to that, we also have what's called a driver technology course that will teach folks how to use their new vehicles with all of the gadgets and all of the things going on there. Because what we were finding was that some older drivers were disabling things that were meant to actually help them drive in a safer manner. So we do have those programs. I'm glad you brought that up. That would be another way that we could get more information out on Vision Zero and on pedestrian safety and the safety of cyclists and things like that. So let's connect on that and let's figure out what we can do in that regard.
Great, thank you, Fred.
And then Lieutenant Anaya, did you want to chime in as well?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that one of the things that we've done recently, and I reported out on this a few months back regarding bicycle safety and what was brought up regarding motorists and how motorists are being, obviously are an equal part of that equation, and sometimes even more so at fault than the bicyclists themselves. So we did a campaign back, and I just pulled some stats on that and reported out. I think it was in October. But we had issued, and I just did a March to March was because that was kind of pre-COVID, and I wanted to see where we were with stats and kind of a realistic number. But we had issued in this bicycle safety campaign that we did internally, because we were having so many issues with bicycle safety and bicycle fatalities last year, from March of 2019 to March of 2020, we issued, just in the traffic enforcement unit alone, we issued 284 citations to motorists for failing to yield to bicyclists in the bicycle lane. That is just that violation alone. That does not include all the citations that we issued for distracted driving and unsafe turning movements and things of that nature regarding bicyclists. So we do an enforcement component and an educational component in here regarding bicyclist safety. Now, I know we had also discussed signage and other things that can possibly help with that, but as far as an enforcement standpoint, I did want you to let you guys know that doesn't fall on deaf ears by any means, and those are things that we look into internally when we start seeing an uptick in bicycle fatalities. How can we target our enforcement accordingly? And of those 284 that we wrote, I know that I want to say about 90% of them were written in the downtown core, because we see the biggest commute, if you will, with bicycles and whatnot in that area. So just kind of wanted to throw a stat out there for you. And one of the things that I had pulled up and some of the things that I had targeted my officers to do during that time frame, because it was obviously a necessary thing. And certainly we're always looking at innovative ways to conduct our enforcement and our education. So there was, along with those 284 citations, there was probably equal, if not more so, warnings that were provided as well. So again, just throwing that out to the group so everyone's aware.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'll kick it over to John, and then I'm gonna go over to our public speakers. But I want to come back after that, and I'm just prompting a question to see if people can think about it, whether it was our presenters or anybody else on the task force. If you have ideas on how you think we can actually cross message maybe, or work together with this messaging, opportunities that you see where, you know, based on what we've seen, what everybody's doing, how potentially can we work together that allows us to not maybe message the same people and have a broader message, and just wanted to prompt that and see if anybody, whether it was the 4 presenters or others on the task force, to respond to that. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Council Member. So I have about 5 things I want to say. I'll cover them briefly. One of the things I noticed right away was there's no consistency of branding. Nobody else is using Vision Zero, not CalWalks, not the county, not VTA. If we really want people to understand Vision Zero, everybody's got to be using the same branding in their safety messages. Every safety campaign should be a subset of a Vision Zero campaign as a higher message, I think, would help get this idea out to everybody. So that means, you know, some of the money's got to be going to all these other organizations to help them fund putting Vision Zero type of information into their literature. We've all talked a little bit about how impactful memorialization can be, and like the World Day of Remembrance. I'd like to see a lot more support for that in how we're going to do Vision Zero. I'd like to see memorialization with more ghost bike monuments being paid for by the city, by signage where pedestrians are being killed. For a couple of years, CalWalks has brought signs to the Vision Zero meeting saying, hey, you know, here's a sign for every person that's died this year. And it has a great impact on the meeting, but really we need those signs on the streets to say, you know, X person died here, right? And even if they only are up for a year, I think that we really need to be getting this message across better, that our roads are not safe, and we need to do that work. I agree with you that we should be focusing more on the drivers. So, you know, like you said, most of the messaging here has been targeted toward the people that are being injured and not toward the people that are causing most of the injury. I am not quite sure how we get that messaging turned around, but it definitely seems like something that the group should explore. I really support your idea of looking at more ways to get the message out, particularly with the senior community. So radio PSAs, more languages, you know, more about the victims. How do we tell their stories? How do we show the impact of their loss? So I'd like to see a lot more focus on getting the awareness to the driver, right, and not necessarily to the people that are walking and biking. We're trying to be careful about that messaging because we don't want it to sound like victim blaming. But you know, whenever the road show or whatever talks about these things, they always talk about this person was wearing black, or you know, they weren't in a lighted crosswalk. Well, the city didn't light the crosswalk, so you know, how can you blame them? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And now we will go over to open up for public comment. And if you've never participated in Zoom before, there's the raise hand button on your toolbar. Please click that. If you're calling in, you'll have to press *9. Our Department of Transportation staff is going to instruct you to unmute yourself so you may speak. And we're going to allocate 2 minutes per speaker. I'll turn it over now to Lam Cruz.
Great, thank you. Just give me a second here. Just want to put that for those who will be joining later. So Mary Lou, I'm going to unmute you. Please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that I'm given this opportunity to talk to you, and I applaud your interest in decreasing bicycle and pedestrian safety on the street. The concern I am bringing to you, I'm looking for direction and help because the street that I'm concerned about will never be on the Vision Zero street map. It's too small of a street, but it is a dangerous street. It is Edenvale Avenue. And for those of you who have been to Hayes Mansion, it's the street that goes along Hayes Mansion. It is a street that is a connector street in San Jose. It is a long street. I don't know if it's 1/8 of a mile or 1/4 of a mile long with no impediments. Cars speed on it. It is only 2 lanes, 1 in each direction. Cars go 30 miles an hour. That's the limit, but they often go over that. There are residential homes, as in single family condominiums. There's a mobile home park, and then Hayes Mansion itself. There is no sidewalk on much of the east side of Edenvale. Therefore, pedestrians who leave the mobile home park through a gate have to walk out directly onto the street. I've lived on Edenvale, or right off of Edenvale, for 25 years, and I've never been able to understand why the city of San Jose tolerates a street that has no bicycle, it has no sidewalk, but it has. I have gone to my city councilman, Ash Calra, now Sergio Jimenez, and talked with them about this, but they have been unable to create change, not because they don't want to, but they have been unable to. I've gone to DOT a number of times, and they have come out and looked at the street. They've studied it. They say that the traffic flow is not high enough. The speed study doesn't justify it. They say that they can't put in a crosswalk because it gives a pedestrian a false sense of security. Where can I go from here? I need your help. I need your direction at least.
Thank you, Mary Lou. In the public comment phase, we won't respond at the moment, but we'll see if somebody can give a response after the public speakers have finished.
Great. Next, I have Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Maybe the previous person can just write a letter to someone on the board, and I'm sure they can write back about the situation. For myself, I come from the point of good policy practices, and this is to consider. We're at a time of Vision Zero stuff with all the COVID that's happening. Vision Zero has narrowed in on kind of the fear I've always had of Vision Zero to focus on law enforcement and surveillance and its technology and its ticketing of people. And, it's a tough compromise at this time. And I want to practice, good neighborhood safety issues. I want to learn what that is. So I am learning those things and learning how to be a person of the community. And I just hope you can learn to include that, with all the 4G and 5G that is going in right now, and that's going to have a ton of more new surveillance technology in it, that it will help Vision Zero immensely. That you can really consider the ideas of open public policy ideas for that technology. You just don't slap that technology in there. You have to learn to ask about it, and just simply ask how can that technology be an open process with the community? And that's where I'm trying to come from, is how do we learn to say that and ask that of our city government? And it's fearful to the city government. They don't want to talk about it. And I'm sure people of Vision Zero, they don't want to talk about it because they want their neighborhood safety issues secure. So I'm in a tough spot. I think it's really important work to describe the future of peace and sustainability of a community. And so I hope you can be a part of that process. And thank you.
Great. Next, I have a phone number with the last 4 digits, 1367. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes, this is Lillian from District 6. I had never really even heard of Vision Zero. When the other gentleman stated that you need more input into the community to let them know it even exists, that would be helpful. But I'm going to tell you from personal experience. I have a bike. I'm in my 60s. I have been fearful of riding that bike. It's brand new. When I moved here about a year ago in these apartments, of riding it around here. I live off of Bascom Southwest Expressway. And, you know, when you're talking about fatalities of people over the age of 60, pedestrians and bicyclists, that's 50% of your fatalities. There's no wonder that you know, people like myself are fearful to ride our bikes. I'm not even sure exactly where I can ride them, even on the trails. So Fred, who deals with seniors, I wish you would address that a little bit more for public comment out in the community. And the third thing I just want to mention is I hear the kids are going back to school in January when the vaccine comes out. I live, you know, by City College, Del Mar, and here's Sherman Oaks School over here. And I'm a former substitute teacher. When I lived in the Valley in Hanford, there were a lot of kids that were getting hit on their bikes because, you know, we're talking a rural area, and many of them didn't wear helmets. And there were a couple of fatalities, one a principal's son. And I remember there was more communication with the different schools about kids wearing their helmets. So when you're talking about bicycles, we're not just talking about adults, we're also talking about children going to school. And hopefully, you know, we'll address that with the helmet laws. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks. Next, I have Hugo.
Hello, Councilmember Perales and the rest of the Vision Zero Task Force. Thank you very much for holding these meetings. My name is Hugo Mesa. I'm a Deputy District Attorney in Santa Clara County. And I'm calling just to maybe put an idea out there. I think it was late September, the governor signed a bill, AB 3234. It's known as misdemeanor diversion. And it's been since codified as Penal Code Section 1001.95 through .97. And essentially what it is it authorizes a judge to use his or her discretion to offer diversion to a misdemeanor defendant over the objection of the prosecution. And there is really no set criteria for the guidelines for granting diversion. It just has to be a misdemeanor. There are certain excluded misdemeanors, such as like domestic violence offenses or offenses that require registration to be as a sex offender. But some qualifying offenses include drunk driving causing injury, vehicular manslaughter. And if one of the issues really brought up, as I hear, is how to reach out to the drivers, perhaps creating some kind of program through the task force that's then, you know, maybe sold or brought to the attention of Superior Court here in Santa Clara County. That could be a program that could be put out there for a judge to potentially consider as a program that they would have to go through, perhaps put out some PSAs, so that, you know, they put in the work to perhaps get their case dismissed. But it would have to be through the cooperation of, you know, the Vision Zero Task Force, completing whatever program is required or put out there. And that's just an idea. I thought I'd put it out. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Hugo.
Great, thanks. Next, I have Brandon Alvarado.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Alvarado, and I'm the president of the Ride of Silence organization, which is an organization that's dedicated towards honoring people who have been killed or seriously injured while riding their bicycle. I also am a cycling instructor, and I was actually involved with the training of all of the VTA cycling instructors that Lauren Ledbetter had mentioned. So I was involved with that process, and I'm also currently serve as the chair of San Jose and the VTA Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So I just have, I think, 3 or 4 things I want to point out. The first thing I wanted to say is that I completely support what John from Silicon Valley Bike Coalition said about desiring more support for the memorialization events for people. As Councilmember Raul Perales pointed out, it was very impactful for him to see these people and be reminded that they're real people that are no longer with us. And I think unless we're having events, I'll just share that one of the things we do with the Rite of Silence is we host an annual event every year on the third Wednesday of May. And we also try to do tribute rides. And in our last tribute ride, we had Pam Foley, I think 3 council members, and Mayor Sam Lucardo attend an event. And between the 2 events we had in 2019, they were extremely impactful to the community and letting our people know that we're doing everything we can. I do support more driver education 100%, but not at the cost of slowing down the progress of education for cyclists. The leading reason statistically, when you look at all the studies that are done, why people choose not to ride a bicycle, and if we're all here to help it make the world so that more people ride bikes, is the leading reason is the perception of safety on the roadways. And if people don't feel safe, they're not gonna ride. The one leading factor that happens between crashes with a car and a cyclist, and I'll wrap up here in just a minute, is that the bicyclist wasn't seen by the driver. And the one way that you can help give yourself the best chance of being seen is being an educated cyclist who knows all of the techniques of being seen, visible, whether it's what you wear, how you ride in the roadways. And then the last thing I just want to put on your—
Thank you, Brandon. We'll have to wrap you up here because we're running to the end and we got to get back to our panelists here. Sorry. Thank you very much. And for Mary Lou as well, I don't believe we'll be able to give you a formal response, but I'll ask a representative from our Department of Transportation if they would be willing to provide their email verbally to you now, and then that way you can connect with them offline.
Yeah, of course. If you want, I could give her a quick response on that, but we'll do both of those if you'd like. This is John Rista, Director of Transportation.
Yeah, if you don't mind, John, if we could just provide an email, just we've got about 4 minutes left, so.
No problem. We'll get her an email.
Yeah, somebody from DOT able to kind of verbally provide your email address?
I was gonna put it in the chat, but I could just do it verbally. So my email as director is my first name, John, John .Ristow, the last name Ristow at sanjoseca.gov, but I'll try to put it in the chat.
Thank you. We don't have a chat function right now.
Oh, we don't have chat. Oh.
Thank you. And so I'm coming back to, and we do have, now we're down to 3 minutes. I'll come back and I see Jesse with his hand up, so I'll go to Jesse.
Actually, I just wanted to follow up and thank everyone for particularly highlighting the challenge of crafting the message and reaching the people. So just to follow that, I think that one of the great things about the technology of Zoom is that we've recorded this meeting and we can give this conversation about the sort of, difficulties that we have in crafting the narrative that attracts the people, when data doesn't do that, to the people who are thinking to be our consultants, to be our outreach consultants. They can understand the sort of, in a sense, by watching this conversation, they can see the sort of challenges that we have that we want to address that are sort of biggest top level challenges. I think also just to talk about the benefits of having this conversation in the context of the task force, a lot of our organizations have assets and also programs where we can reach out to very specific audiences. Obviously, we've touched on the point that the people driving the cars are the people that we want to reach, and how do we reach them, and particularly how do we reach them during the pandemic when we don't reach them the same way as we've reached them in the past. So I think that we can think through the assets we have, whether it be through schools, working with the County Office of Education and figuring out which schools, and whether that we want to reach the parents, because, for example, one of the things we found out is that the people driving the cars who hit the people who die in traffic fatalities are predominantly men who are adults, ages 20 to 50, roughly speaking. That's an audience that we may be able to reach through schools, or we may be able to reach in many, many other ways. But, that's just to give an example of the way that we can work with partners who are on the call here, and then also work with the consultant who we haven't hired yet, but we will be. I'll end there. I just wanted to say that for the person who made the comment about Edenville Avenue, if you didn't write down the emails before, there is one at the bottom of this slide where you can reach out to the DOT directly and it will come to us. So I'll end there and hand it back to the council member.
Thank you for stating that, Jesse, and appreciate that. And yeah, sorry, we are just out of time, so we're not able to dive in, and even on the topic or the question that I posed, but I do want everybody to kind of continue to think about how we might be able to cross-collaborate on some of this outreach and messaging. I think we heard a lot of really good opportunities today. And so our next task force meeting will be Friday, March 5th from 9 till 11 a.m. And the topic or the theme will be on data. And we invite all of our task force members back to continue to participate with us and all the members of the public. Thank you to everybody for participating and engaging today. And please do stay safe. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.